Hey, I'm Sage Plays, and today we're building a habitat for one of the most charismatic animals in Planet Zoo and indeed the world, the giant panda. We're going to build them a unique multi-level habitat inside this beautiful panda garden that we built last week. We'll also check out some adorable new zoo babies. Let's go! Alright, the first thing I want to do in the panda habitat is get some rock walls in. And these ones that we built for the savannah will make a nice base. So we'll take these and start lining the walls with them. And then later on we're going to add some different types of rocks to them to make them look more interesting. So we're going to have them fairly high around the back of the habitat here, so we block out a lot of this white wall, and then we're going to leave some of the walls showing as well, so we get a nice juxtaposition between the modernist building and a much more natural looking habitat. So we'll just place these along here, make sure they're not so far back that they're parking outside the walls, and we'll keep doing that until we get to the first of the windows here. And then when we get to the windows, we're going to make the rocks a little bit lower, so we still allow some light to come in here, whilst also getting a bit of a height variation in so it looks nice. So we'll graduate that, so this one goes down a bit, and then the next one that we place in will be a little bit lower, and then we'll just keep doing that until we get this area filled in. The giant panda is going to take up about half of the inside of this building, and we're going to be building the habitat slightly lowered, which we'll do here, so that the guests get a really good view. Now, normally with giant pandas, you don't keep a pair of them together on a permanent basis. You'll have them in separate habitats. And then when the female's ready to breed, or when you think the female's ready to breed, giant pandas are one of the hardest animals to persuade to breed on the planet, then you will introduce the male into the habitat for a limited amount of time and cross your fingers, basically. So we're in franchise mode here, so I don't have the room to build two separate habitats. What I'm going to do is build one habitat that's a realistic size and design it in such a way that it looks like it's two habitats with a passage between them that can be opened for the male panda at the appropriate time. Now you can see we've got a lot of glass in the ceiling here, but due to where the sun sits in Planet Zoo, I'm not getting enough light into this habitat for my liking. So what I'm going to do is add some lights into the ceiling. Now from up here, they are not going to make any difference to the lighting in the habitat. So each light is going to be duplicated and then placed underground, where it will magically light that little bit of floor that it's just under. And once we spin these round, we're going to have these lights on every two of the support struts in the ceiling. So we'll just rotate them round like so, and keep doing that all the way around. You can see that it starts lighting up the habitat in addition to the rays of lights already coming in from the ceiling. The lighting in here is really nice when it's all finished, because it changes throughout the course of the day as the sun moves. You get little pools of light all around the habitat. It looks really nice. Okay, that's all the lights in. We'll put some habitat barriers in. They're all going to be null barriers, so we'll just put a door in here, make sure we've got a lot of space for our pandas, and then we'll move on to the pathing. As well as lowering the habitat, we're also going to raise the paths, because what I want is the climbing structures for the pandas, which are going to be the most important part of the habitat, and we'll get to those in a minute, to be at the eye level of the guests, which gives them the perfect view. These paths don't need to just go past the giant panda habitat, they also need to connect up to the entrance and the exit, and take people past the red panda habitat as well. I know I said last week that I'd be building both panda habitats this week, but let's just say this giant panda habitat took quite a while, so we'll be dealing with the red pandas next week. As I record this, I've pretty much finished that habitat and I'm really happy with it, so looking forward to getting onto that as well. This path is where the red panda habitat's going to be, and this is also going to connect up to the staff area. All this staff area will be hidden away from the guests. Typical fun with Planet Zoo paths, but we get there in the end. And that is pretty much everything laid out. We're also going to put in the path that joins us up to the African area, which will be the back entrance. We did the main entrance connecting up to the Indian forest in Madagascar last week. We'll use those same rocks again to decorate the paths, and while I do that, we'll talk about today's influences. So there have been two main influences on this habitat. The general concept of a big modern building with a giant panda and red panda habitat in it is taken from River Wonders in Singapore, which I was lucky enough to visit last year. Absolutely amazing place. And then the design of the giant panda habitat is mainly coming from Ouwehannes Dierenpark in the Netherlands. I pray I pronounced that right. My record with Dutch zoo pronunciations has not been great, but I actually watched a video and did a bit of research this time to try and get it right. The habitat that they have is a big, sort of classic, cheesy Chinese temple, but inside it is some really, really cool habitats which feature big climbing platforms for the pandas, all joined together by these kind of Indiana Jones style rickety log bridges for the pandas to walk along. It looks really cool, so we're going to replicate that here. These climbing platforms were built for the orangs in the Treetop Trail, and we want to build new ones using just the tops of these as a base for it. If we move one of them higher than the other, then we can get the ladders in that the pandas are going to use to climb between them. We're going to use this big fake tree to replace the logs in the original, and then later on we're going to do something really cool to these. We'll get to that in a minute. For now, we're going to move this fake tree into the center, so it looks like this is what the platform is supported by. Make sure it's exactly in the middle. We'll recolor it as well to make it fit more nicely with the wooden planks that we've already got there. We'll delete the original struts. We don't want any climbable pieces that aren't necessary here because that's going to affect performance. And there we go, that's starting to look nice. It'll get nicer in a minute, but let's get on to the wooden bridges. So I've done some testing with the pandas at Tecton Zoo, and this Australian plank is wide enough for them to walk on. So what I'm going to do is use that as a measuring device, and then we're going to make something a bit more interesting using upside down bark pieces. So we'll get these so they are definitely as wide as that Australian plank, and then we can just copy them along. So we got like 3 of these here. There's a little gap in the middle which we can cover up, and then we can delete the Australian plank and start getting some logs in underneath as supports for the steps, I guess you'd call them. And then we can copy these across. So we'll copy one and then we'll spin this round so they don't all look the same. And then once we've got 2 of them in, we can just start copying them until we've got a sort of log bridge, wooden bridge, ladder kind of thing. And then we'll drop it into here. So it's going to be angled downwards so that the pandas can walk up here from the floor of the habitat and get up onto the climbing platforms. And we're going to have loads of these in, so they've got a nice long path to walk between. And as usual, we'll be using food and enrichment items and things like that to give them a reason to come up here. Ideally, we want the pandas spending as much time as possible up on these climbing platforms so that the view for the guest is as good as possible. I've put a 3rd climbing platform in now, so we've got a really nice long path for them to go through so they spend as much time as possible up here. We'll make some more bridges to join them. I did start using this climbing piece, but the pandas didn't seem to like it, so I replaced it with another one of the ones that we've just made in the end. And then we're going to start making the walls look a bit more interesting, like I said earlier. So I'm going to drop in some of the natural rocks into these faux rocks that we've used here. And we get the positioning right. This is the desert rock, and we use some of the savanna rocks as well. Just gives us a bit of a different color and a bit of a different texture. And we can drop these in randomly to different rocks all around the habitat and just get a really interesting look. Mixing the different types of rocks together can get you such a unique look. It is really worth doing. I was going to make it a Franchise Masters, and then I realized I think I've already discussed this technique when we started the Frozen North, so I decided not to. And that leaves us with no Franchise Masters this week, although I do have a very exciting set of new animals to show you in the Frozen North a bit later in the episode. But if there's any areas of the game that you guys want to know about, anything that you want some tips on, any specific building or anything like that, then let me know in the comments and I will feature them in Franchise Masters next week. This is that exact same rock piece, but now flipped onto its side, and we'll use this to join the soil in the habitat onto this rock wall. Makes it look much more realistic, instead of the rocks just sort of growing up out of the floor. And then we'll move back to those climbing platforms and start making them look really interesting. This is an upside down candelabra tree, and because it's upside down, the branches look like roots, and it looks absolutely amazing. It's got all this green on it, so it looks a bit like moss, and we're going to spam loads of these around here to get a really unique looking climbing platform. You can see these giant roots in the background as well. I'd love to take credit for this idea, but I've got to give full credit to another amazing creator that we featured on the channel many times, Drac. He discovered that turning the ombu tree upside down enables you to use its huge branches as roots, and he reminded me about that on Discord the other day, so I've decided to use his idea here, and that led to me turning literally every tree in the game upside down to see what other cool effects we could get. This is another one here. This is the common yew tree. That looks really good. Big chunky trunk upside down, copied around, looks great. You got to be careful with the hitboxes sometimes when you do stuff like this and make sure it doesn't impede the animal's movement. But these upside down tree trunks don't seem to have any effect on the pandas, so we can place as many of these as we like to get this looking exactly the way that we want to. And yeah, I'm not joking when I said every tree in the game. Most of them don't have any sort of extra uses, but a few do, and we're using pretty much all of them here. Once we've finished our crazy tree experiments, we can move on and give the pandas a reason to actually come up onto these platforms. So we're going to drop the arboreal feeder in here. This piece used to drive me mad. It's called arboreal, it's for animals that climb, but basically you have to have it on the floor so the keepers can reach it. But as long as we make sure the keepers can walk up these wooden bridges as well as the pandas, then we can put it up here, and this will work absolutely fine. The keepers will walk up here, put the food down, and then the pandas will come up to eat the food. Next up, we're going to put the implied habitat wall in. So we'll use this arrangement of rocks here and put this basically halfway through the habitat. You can see we've got a little viewing gallery here for the first panda habitat, and then where we've just been working will be the viewing for the second panda habitat, and we use a PVC door to split the two of them off. That way the pandas will be able to get between each habitat absolutely fine, but it'll also look like the habitat can be split into two to separate the pandas as well. Now we need to get some barriers in to stop the guests from getting into the habitat. The rocks we've already placed will do the job for the pandas, no need for any additional barriers for them. We're going to use bamboo pieces for this for theming purposes, so we'll recolor them so they look like kind of burnt bamboo, and then we'll just use the same piece 3 times to make the basics of each panel of the barrier. We'll put some rope in so that it looks like it's joined together nicely. Just 2 pieces of that. And then we're going to take the thinnest glass piece in the game, which is this glass panel here. This is a great piece because it's got metal on all 4 sides, so the glass doesn't just look like it's disappearing into the ground, all looks like it's one solid piece. And once we've made that piece, then we can just copy it down here so that the guests can't just step straight into the habitat. Then we're going to put something that I've taken directly from River Wonders in, which is coolers all the way around the walls. So they're arranged in groups of 3 at River Wonders, and I'm going to replicate that here. And again, we'll just use that same mud pillar that we've been using since the beginning of the last episode to rotate those around the walls, so they're all around the walls in groups of 3. And because you can actually see the cold air that they're kicking out, that's going to make the habitat more dynamic as well. Now we're going to make the floor of the habitat look more interesting by using the tree bark path to cover up the dirt. Now we did this before in the kangaroo habitat in Australia and it worked perfectly, and I decided to take it to the next level here and make the entire floor out of this path texture. Unfortunately, I discovered when I added the pandas in that completely screws with their movement. And basically they would just stand in one spot until they started to starve, which was not ideal. It turns out I think if you have pretty much the entire habitat covered in path, it really confuses the animals. Don't know if that's specific just to pandas. As much as I love the look of this, in the end habitat we've just got a few bits of that path here and there for effect, and the rest of it I've used loads of different types of dirt and sand textures to make it look interesting. Now I told you a few episodes ago that I'd keep you updated on the wolf pack, and we have 3 wolf pups. The white one here is called Alaska, and the others are called Yukon and Ontario. They're all named after states in the northern United States and Canada, and oh my god, they are so cute. The way they do their little howls when their parents howl is unbelievable. Thank you for suggesting we add wolves into the frozen north, because I absolutely love them. Okay, that's the habitat side of things pretty much done. What we need to do now is put in an entrance hallway that's really impressive for the guests to enter in when they come through the front door, so let's get that sorted. Now this is a climate controlled habitat, so we need 2 sets of doors here, one to get the guests into the building, and then a second one to act as almost like an airlock so that all the cold air that we're pumping into this habitat doesn't just escape and they get replaced by the hot Southern Californian air outside. And then we need to make the entrance area that they come into look beautiful, so we'll copy in one of the flower beds from the front of the building, and then we're going to put a waterfall in, and as we normally do, we'll spin it on its side so you get the slower moving water, and then we'll fill the rest of this bed up with some plants and some bamboo. We'll use both thicknesses of the bamboo pieces, make sure they're at different heights so it looks more interesting, put some bramble bushes in down here, we'll get some other plants in as well, and then put some rocks to tie it all together. Bit of ivy in there, that looks cool. And then the final thing we'll do is cover up the back of the entrance with a load more bamboo pieces and put one of Roman's bonsais in here as well. That'll look great for when guests first walk through those PVC doors. If you want to use any of the bonsai that you've seen me using in this episode and the last one as well, then just head to the Steam Workshop and search for the San Bernardino Zoo workshop group. You'll find them in there. They're by Romano Palacios and they look amazing. Just one more piece on either side, and that is the giant pandas and the entrance to the panda garden complete. Let's check it out. Here's the little entrance that we just built. And here's the pandas, or the first of the pandas, just climbing up onto the climbing platforms that we built. Looks really cool in here. I'm so pleased that they're able to walk all the way along these log bridges. They can do it from both ends, and especially when the keepers have put food up on the feeding platform, they do it quite a lot. They are pretty ground-dwelling animals. Pandas being bears, they don't climb all the time or anything like that, but they do it enough to make this habitat look really good. And on the other side, our other panda is using the tree scatter feeder. Guests have got a really good view from the first viewing point here. It's a shame we can't actually separate them. Obviously, each one can go into each other's habitat whenever they like. It's just one big habitat, but it sells the illusion quite nicely when they're on different sides of the big wall. Mixing animals like this is definitely something I'd really like to see added into any potential Planet Zoo 2. Look at this guy scratching away on his scratching post. And this is what it looks like when they're both on the same side. Overall, I'm very, very happy with this. If you want to see how we built the building in the first place, make sure you check out the last week's episode. I'll put a link to it on screen now. Next week, we'll be adding in the red pandas. I'm already about halfway through building their habitat, and I absolutely love it already. Thank you for joining the Explorers Club if you have. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you next week. Bye.